Hello, computer.
This is Hello Computer, a series of interviews carried out in 2023, at a time when artificial intelligence appears to be going everywhere all at once. Our next interview is with Dr. Eman El-Sheikh of the Center for Cybersecurity at the University of West Florida.
I'm Eman El-Sheikh. I am Associate Vice President and Professor at the University of West Florida Center for Cybersecurity. I've been in AI for about 33 years now. I've been doing AI in various forms. I started, if you want to hear the kind of the backstory, when I was an undergraduate and looking for an elective to take my junior year in college. And I was going through the list. I saw this course way back then called AI. I thought, well, this sounds interesting. And so I signed up, fell in love immediately. Decided it was just mind-blowing, the things I was learning about compared to everything else, and decided that I wanted to pursue a PhD in AI. So many years later, that's what I did. And I'm currently now working in cybersecurity, and it's great to kind of be able to see the intersection between the two, and let alone, of course, the impact that AI is having on our society globally.
So you were in AI before it was cool. You were there before it was a thing then.
It's definitely, I think, a long history, I think. And it's, for me, very kind of heartwarming to see some of the things that we thought would take quite a while to achieve, or maybe not achieve, actually come about much sooner. So that's very kind of fascinating to watch. And I think AI has been a buzzword for quite a bit. But I think most recently, all the recent advancements have really kind of made it an everyday thing. And so it's exciting, to see kind of the potential impact it's already having. But back in the day, there weren't open source tools where we could just feed the data. At least there weren't a lot of those, or useful ones. It was a lot of just algorithmic development and testing with the limited information we have. So I love what I'm seeing.
What's the sense of the pace of change? How has your year felt? Has it felt particularly fast, or is this just another year of the office?
Oh, it's incredible. The pace that we're seeing right now, I think, is unmatched, particularly for AI, with all the recent, for example, developments in generative AI, language models. And it's really, I think, been kind of the, if you kind of back up to even just before this year, maybe 2 or 3 years, 5 years ago, it's really been, I think, a convergence of factors that have led to kind of AI being in everything that we do, or wanting to get there. It's been, the development of more advanced tools and algorithms and models. So deep learning, language models, lots of advancements in the actual techniques and the algorithms. It's been the availability of data and large-scale data. That was always kind of an issue with some of these techniques, is even if you have the algorithm or process, where's the data that you can leverage? So the fact that there's a lot more open source data makes it helpful as well in large data sets to actually train AI methods on. I think the other thing is also just the availability of open source tools, right? Where it's not now just constricted to the research labs, right? And for, if you think about really the history of a lot of AI started in, government research labs, and then it kind of expanded into, higher education research labs. But now the availability of tools makes it so that anybody could get their feet wet in AI. You could use very simple tools where you could even in grade school be testing out kind of machine learning methods, looking through libraries of data sets. I think the other kind of key factor that we often forget about is the advances in computing power, right? Back in the day, even before, my time in AI, a lot of systems would run on mainframe machines. Some systems would take days to process results, right? Batch processing those days. And now we've got, supercomputers who could process, that could process all this very quickly. And it's kind of, I think, the convergence of those factors that have led to us to where we are now. But I think most recently with kind of the, for example, generative models like GPT 3 and 4 and ChatGPT, and the availability of, now even APIs and tools to leverage those and integrate models like that into every single thing we do, this is just mind blowing. I mean, I think we're at a point where we're going to look back at this time in history and kind of see it as transformative to the way we live.
And these days, your focus is cybersecurity. So please tell us, what are your concerns then when AI and cybersecurity meet?
Well, there's always the good and the bad. Thank you for asking, right? So there's always starting with kind of the benefits that AI brings to cybersecurity. I mean, it is able to automate a lot of things that we, couldn't do as effectively without, so for example, being able to search through large volumes of data on network traffic and identify, malicious data or things that could be suspect or so there's a lot of potential things that are being aided now by AI and machine learning, better threat hunting, better incident response, better kind of identifying of cyber attacks and earlier identification. However, as you mentioned, there's a lot of concerns or risks that we are also facing. And that's important kind of for those on, the cybersecurity or cyber defense side to know is that the hackers have access to the same AI tools. We always have to keep that in mind, right? They can leverage these same powerful tools and techniques. And so they can use that to then trick systems, right? To trick defenders and to find a way in, for example, find a loophole. So for example, things like disinformation, launching offensive cyber attacks. There's so many things that unfortunately AI could be used for good or for bad. And so I think, for those of us trying to kind of do the cybersecurity or cyber defense side, we've got to keep in mind not only how to leverage AI, how to use it effectively, but also how to mitigate its risks and prevent that.
You mentioned open source there, and the fact that a lot of AI development now appears to be moving into the open source arena. We heard about a so-called leaked memo within Google saying that open source is going to steal everybody's lunch. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a good thing. I think it'll happen gradually. It does, I think there's a lot of consequences or kind of ripple effects to going open source, right? Because you think about it from from my perspective as an educator, it's all about learning, right? Making learning available to everyone, how learning supports what we do in the advancement of society and communities and people. But, you think about from company point of view or private sector point of view, that, that is their intellectual property. That is what they pride themselves on developing and being the first to be out there. So I think we are always, as a society, as a global society, making strides towards information sharing, collaborating, open source, but doing it in a way where it's gradual so that it's tested, so that it's done without kind of catching anybody off guard. So I would certainly, continue to advocate for more of that. I think it's not going to happen as quickly, of course, as we would like it to, but I think we're already seeing huge progress, especially, like I said, in the last 30 years when there were none. Everything was very proprietary, even in individual research labs across the country or globe. Look at where we are now, the dozens of AI tools, ChatGPT, who would have thought that they would have made that available to the public. Of course, they say it's for testing and for research and they're going to collect data. But even within their first week, they had millions of users and that continues to grow. So I think we're making leaps and bounds and I think that should continue to be a goal.
What does the individual have to think? We're talking about governments, we're talking about companies and corporations, but what responsibilities do individuals have to take for themselves? I
think, the primary thing would be, I'd say, as an individual is education, being familiar. I don't think this is going to be something that we can overlook, right? What we're seeing now with AI being, infused into everything, whether it's security, healthcare, transportation, art, music, you name it, robotics. There's just so many different applications, even just everyday life, right? Smart homes, smart cities, smart environments, smart applications, virtual assistants, that I think the most important thing is for people to be aware of it and make an effort to learn about it, even just the basic use, right? We're not asking everybody to become AI researchers or understand kind of the techniques behind it, but just understand how it affects you. For example, if you're using a smartphone, how could AI benefit you, or how could it, adversely, affect you? For example, privacy concerns or things like that. For just the common things, I think it's really important for us as individuals to kind of take advantage of this and be aware, because otherwise we'll get left behind. I think back to the time when, the internet and the World Wide Web were new, right? A lot of people thought, well, this is something that's going to stay in the defense labs. We don't need to be aware of it, right? This is not going to affect me, right? Let's fast forward to right now, right? Who doesn't use it? Who isn't familiar? Who can't do it at the tip of their fingertips, right? And so that would be my kind of advice to people is, don't kind of shy away. Don't be scared. It's pretty easy now, and it's pretty helpful. There are ways for everybody to kind of leverage it, but just do it responsibly as well.
What happens if they don't do anything, though?
I think we're going to see, a lot of, movement, even in kind of workforce, in terms of automation. I do think we're going to see, there's always been, for as long as I remember and as long as I've been teaching AI, I always get questions about, is it going to take over the world? Is mankind going to lose, its form? And, I'd say, I always kind of have been a fan of, let's look at, the potential usefulness, but do it in a responsible way. So I think there are, I don't think, back to that question, I don't think AI is going to take over the world. I still don't think that. But I do think it's going to change the nature of how we live. So I think if they don't, there will be some people who are left behind. There will be some jobs or workforce needs that are changed. A lot of the tasks or jobs, even in cybersecurity, that can be automated will be automated, right? So you think about, for example, cashiers, tellers, services, basic services. Those kinds of jobs are probably we're going to see diminishing needs. Even in the world of cybersecurity, going back to that, level one kind of security analysts or network analysts that are kind of, their role is to, be in the stock kind of watching traffic, watching network traffic, watching data, looking for signs of any malicious activity. Well, we now know that AI and machine learning tools can automate that, can do it much quicker, and can do it much more effectively. So, we are going to see shifts. So I think for people to kind of not, kind of jump on the bandwagon, they might get left behind. And I would just urge people not to be scared. It's not something that, you have to get into the details on, but you can think about, from your perspective, whether you're doing, business or healthcare or music or anything else. What can AI do for me is how I would, encourage people to approach it.
My understanding is that there was already a skills gap in the cybersecurity industry. Is that right?
There still is, in fact, a skills gap. And that's primarily a lot of what I focus on now as well, is that we have, at least here in the U.S., over 750,000 open cybersecurity jobs. That number is trending upward, not downward. And globally, it's estimated to be around 2.5 million, cybersecurity jobs. And unfortunately, that skills gap is growing because people and companies are realizing how much cyber they actually need within their organization. So there's a lot more, for example, not just kind of government or enterprise organizations needing cybersecurity skills and talent. Now there's small businesses that need it. There is K through 12 school systems. I mean, we've seen cyber attacks on everything from local schools to hospitals to you name it. And so everybody needs to be thinking about security, which means that then, the skills needs are going to increase. Meanwhile, every attack that we see is a little bit more advanced or different from the one before. So, the needs of kind of understanding cyber attacks and threat vectors and landscape also evolves. In addition to that, as you mentioned earlier, the tools are evolving, right? So it's kind of creating that, trifecta of why we have such a skills shortage. And so there's an opportunity, again, where AI could help by filling in some of those skills, but doing it in a way where, I always believe the goal is more, I call it, the AI kind of human teaming, solution. To me, that's always kind of, a good end goal is not for the AI to take over or not to kind of eliminate the human, but to kind of work in it as an AI human team where then, kind of the AI can do a lot of kind of the quick and dirty work, analyze the data, come up with recommendations, but also integrate kind of human expertise, because there are still some things that people will do better.
And we all become AI wranglers, is that right?
There you go. I think it's very much needed because we can't put all our eggs in the AI basket, right? Even speaking from somebody who's been doing it for a while, there are not only the risks, for example, that I mentioned with security being, but there's also kind of the limitations still that we have with AI approaches. The data aspects, for example, incomplete data, and bias in data. We always talk about, with any AI model or machine learning algorithm, no matter how complex and advanced it is, we say garbage in is garbage out, right? So if you feed it bad data, that's what you're going to get, on the in terms of outputs. And so we always, I think, have to be careful about putting AI in, putting everything into the AI basket where it takes over. I think we've seen much more success with integrated approaches where it's kind of that joint decision making and, what joint recommendations. Because, for example, look at higher level skills like, cognitive, creative thinking, analytical thinking, problem solving. We're still, even with the most advanced GPT models, still not quite there, right? We can still, if we want to kind of apply the Turing test, kind of identify, just not to a lesser extent, but still kind of identify which music or art was AI generated versus human generated.
The Turing test has a very unique part, I guess, in cybersecurity, because it's my understanding that humans are the weakest link generally. Is that right? That they're the ones that are socially engineered into just giving up their passwords?
George, you have just become a cyber pro. Thank you for saying that, because that is the key. You just hit the nail on the head. No matter what, happens, the human is always the weakest link in cybersecurity. I mean, we can employ the most advanced tools, the most advanced AI, but like we were talking about earlier, the hackers have the same access, so that doesn't necessarily help. And if we look at some of the most kind of, significant far-reaching breaches that we've had, it's been, like you said, inadvertent user click, inadvertent access, inadvertent, or malicious. It could be, sharing of information, passwords, clicking on links. And so, it's definitely, I think, a challenge, to kind of address that. But I think it also goes back, from my perspective, to the need for more education and training, right? Because no matter how, secure we make systems, all it takes is for one person to, accidentally share their password, click on a link, to, wipe through layers of defense, right?
That learning and education becomes even more crucial when the hackers can now deep fake authentic people, or authentic language and authentic accents, and all of a sudden, rather than being on the other side of the world with English as perhaps a third language and they're having to do everything by text, they can now present on screen as a native of the land in which they're wanting to hack, and all of a sudden there's a million fake people trying to get people's passwords. What happens then to society?
It is very real. It's a very real risk and concern, because the enhancements that we've seen with how AI can generate, like you're saying, language and generate verbal responses and mimic others, is almost, you can't tell anymore. It's gotten so good, which again, as one side of me is very happy to see the advances in AI. The other side's thinking, oh my God, now what do we do, right? And so I think, the key is to keep people up to date. I think, one of the challenges we faced in cybersecurity, and AI now advancements make it a lot harder, is keeping everybody up to date, right? What we know about AI, cybersecurity last year or how we approach it is very different. It continues to change because the attack vectors get more complex, the tools get more complex. So I think one of the keys for us, I think, as human race to be thinking about is kind of the need for, continuous kind of learning, right? Lifelong learn. We should all become lifelong learners. We are in a digital world where things are moving very quickly. I mean, think about the generations that are growing up now and what they're going to start off with, right? And so I think, one of the keys is to kind of start early in grade school, start at the elementary school level and be teaching, kids how to adapt, how to kind of work with technology in general, and not just specific tools or they need to learn language models or AI. It's more about just being digital citizens and all that comes with it. How do we adapt to technology? How do we embrace the concept of being lifelong learners? How do we know good from bad, right? Just like you said, because, there could be, I've seen, scams where they're using kind of generating voices to scam people into thinking there are issues going on or to, access things. And so I think that kind of lifelong learning to me is the key to all that. And then I also think, in addition to more kind of awareness and education training, we do need, a little bit more kind of regulation or policy or guidelines, because right now it's just a free for all, right? And this is only going to get worse if we let it go. So I think at least having some kind of, best practices and guidelines that are issued by kind of collaborations of, governments across the world, private sector companies, academia, industry, so that there's kind of let's talk about, best use guidelines, right? Things like that. It would really help a lot before we have significant issues. It's good to kind of get out ahead of the problem.
Do you think the governments are doing enough? Do you think anybody is doing enough? Or do you think that every part of society needs to be doing more?
I think they're certainly trying. I know that, here in the U.S. for, several years now, we've been, certainly as a, part of higher education, we work a lot with our government partners on security issues. And they've certainly been kind of putting out, guidance on, everybody needs to look at AI more seriously. Everybody needs to be cognizant of the uses, the potential risks, the ethics. It's just not easy always to move the big ship, whether that's, a country or a globe, right, all together. So I think I think we're trying, but we also need more, right? Because it's not going to be kind of just a one-time, here's the policy or here's, the guidelines and it's done. It has to be, again, a continuously adaptive process. And it also has to factor in kind of, different perspectives. What does healthcare face or need as opposed to cybersecurity? What about, energy? What about, transportation? It also needs to factor in learning and educational guidelines. How do we factor in, for example, ethics? I think that's one of the, keys that I don't think we're talking yet about enough is, ethical AI. In the research world, we talk about that, secure AI, and how do we make sure, like you're saying, it's not hackable, and ethical AI as well. But that needs to infiltrate to, broader society beyond the research labs as well, because just like with, security, in order to do good cybersecurity, we've got to be able to teach, how to, kind of, hack, right? So that's kind of ethical hacking or penetration testing. But we do it kind of with that ethics in mind. And I think with AI, we've got to kind of teach that ethics early on as well. So I think there is definitely a need to continue these conversations and do it, I think, in a more coordinated way for the best results and the fastest impact.
That's a fascinating point. I mean, ethical hacking as a career option has been around for how long? A few years, perhaps? Maybe more? What do you think?
Yeah, I'd say it's, good 10, 20 years, but maybe it wasn't called that. It's definitely increased a little bit more. And I'll tell you, I mean, that's one thing that at least, our students here are very interested in, right? Is, because they find that intriguing, being able to kind of, hack into something. And there's now all sorts of, global, regional, national competitions where That's what students compete, sign up for teams to do is, test systems, can they, our students recently competed in the global penetration testing competition and did quite well. So there's definitely a need, but even, for example, in our curricula, we start by teaching ethics, right? Before we get into kind of the cool methods, because it's just like a sport, in order to, if you're a defender, you play, soccer or football defense, you got to understand how the offense works, right? You can't just be living in, playing football in a vacuum. So it's the same for cybersecurity, right? In order to be a good cyber defender, you've got to understand some of the offensive techniques, how they work. But with that comes a responsibility. And I think with AI, we really need to start getting that out kind of, to society much more broadly, immediately. Because I think right now, it's almost like with the click of a button, especially with, ChatGPT, everybody's now using it, right? Whether it's, to, do homework or to, generate music or, to research various articles. I keep trying to ask it about itself, right? Because I'm interested in the research and trying to trip it up. Those are my questions. But I think, I think when a lot of these methods or tools were confined to kind of educational or research settings, the ethics were more understood. But now that it's all of a sudden gone mainstream everywhere, not just as users, but as kind of being able to apply it, kind of use tools like ChatGPT or other models to do work, we've got to kind of bring the policy and the best practices and the ethics alongside with it.
That's another fascinating point. Surely the cybersecurity industry will be flooded by sports fans who get the whole idea of working on teams on the offense and on the defense.
Oh, definitely. I'm a huge sports fan, so I refer to that analogy a lot. But I do think it's a team sport, and it's very similar. I mean, this is a great way of also kind of explaining it to people, or to those who may be interested, is that you have to be well-rounded. You have to understand a little bit of everything. So if you understand how the attacks will come in, what they will look like, what constitutes something that could be a ransomware attack or a phishing scam, then you're more likely to better defend and protect against it. And so I think we can use that same analogy for AI, right? Is that it comes with pros and cons. There are benefits and risks, and we need to do a better job of kind of explaining all that at the beginning, or providing tools that come with that, because I'm not sure that right now, kind of the frenzy we're seeing with everybody using generative AI, that kind of accompanying words of caution have come with it.
What would a cyber Pearl Harbor look like using AI in the foreseeable future?
So that's something we worry about a lot. I mean, I think we're already kind of seeing I guess very scary. We've already had pretty serious cyber attacks. I think one of the things that continues to be, I think, a risk I see and others in the field see as risk is protecting our critical infrastructure. So we've seen recent attacks already, even without widespread AI use on energy systems, on healthcare systems, on defense systems, and nuclear power plants, and those risks are going to continue to be elevated because of now kind of the additional advanced tools that AI brings to both, like you said, the offense as well as the defense. Those, whether it's, ransomware, I think there have been, ransomware attacks on hospitals. Even in the UK, we've had the gas pipeline issues. We've had, water plant issues. We've had transportation attacks. So I think, how do we then, kind of address critical infrastructure security by leveraging AI, but also by mitigating kind of its potential risks side by side is going to be key. And I think that's really the biggest kind of worry that, myself, others in the field have, because we're talking about, your power grid systems, nuclear power plants, transportation systems, defense, systems and location. So it's pretty large scale. And we've already seen kind of glimpses of that when entire hospital systems go down, or, how that affects the world, or when, gas pipelines, get affected, and how that affects not just, the energy sector, but it affects the economy, national security. And so I think it's important to kind of be thinking of this as the broad picture, globally, what can we collectively do about it? And I'm always, from my angle, thrilled to see collaborations, across, boundaries and, across countries, across governments, across organizations. But I think more is needed, and definitely the integration of AI, and machine learning to protect critical infrastructure, but also to mitigate against the risks.
So we're asking national governments and agencies to cooperate at like the Five Eyes level, to share information. Are they going to do that?
I think so. At least for cybersecurity, they are already trying. There are advisories that are put out by collaborative agencies. So, for example, here in the U.S., the CISA and NSA will sometimes get together and put out advisories. But I've also seen advisories with the UK National Cybersecurity Center and with other agencies. So trying to bring together what is shareable for the greater good. It takes a while to get there, right? Because a lot of that has to be confirmed, has to be put in a specific way. And so how do we keep up, with the growing threats, is by, I think, keeping that going, not being reactive, but being more proactive to say, here's the routine things we need to be looking at. So we definitely need more of it, but it is, like you're saying, it is a two-edged sword, because then, we also know that, whether it's, nation state, adversaries, or whether it's, script kiddies, are also leveraging those tools and those advisories and guidance, for malicious acts.
You were saying earlier that you've been asking ChatGPT about itself. Did you have any interesting responses?
Well, I still, it's still every once in a while, when it can't answer the question, would just tell me, I'm just a model. This is as far as I know. Give me generic answers. So I haven't been able to trip it up, because I've been a long fan of the Turing test and where we can go with that. So I haven't been able to trip it up quite as quickly or as easily as with other things, which is great to see. But every once in a while, when it can't answer, it'll just tell me the extent of what it knows. So at least it's a safe answer.
So was that your instinct to try to break it?
Well, it was my, not necessarily just break it, but really understand it and see if it understands itself. I think it also goes back to in my early days. So my research focused a lot on being able to leverage AI for explanation, and specifically how could we use AI in education, to support education, to provide tools such as explanations of reasoning, tutoring, things like that. And I think that unfortunately with, deep learning and, generative AI models, that's still lacking, right? The explanation part. It can come up with great answers, great recommendations, but they still have a hard time explaining how they got there. And that's just because of the nature of the algorithms and the models and how they work. So my intrigue was really to see, have we made progress in that regard? And then also maybe try to trip it up. Why not?
This is the black box situation. That's right. Where, we don't know why the output is what the output is. I mean, are we going to see more and more black box situations like this?
I think so, because I think that's where the advances are primarily happening, is with a lot of the, deep learning and, models that aren't necessarily designed to explain. However, so we're definitely seeing where it could do things really well and really accurately and really quickly, but it can't explain it. And so I think it does create a need for then the explainable AI part to catch up, so hopefully this will trigger more research on how to integrate knowledge models, semantic processing with these, other AI techniques in order to create both, right? Have, good output, quick output, reliable output, but also explainable output, especially if we want to use or leverage AI more for education. I also think but this also goes back to, the point we were talking about earlier about the need for more human AI teaming, right? Because if you're using just an AI system alone and it can't explain, then that could be detrimental. But if you're teaming it up with a human who could then take those results and help to explain as part of the process, that creates a much more useful, usable system. And as an example, that's particularly important in a field like cybersecurity, because often, with attacks happening or being detected, quickly, or your response time is one of the things that you want to be able to address. How quickly can you identify a cyber threat or attack? How quickly can you, identify kind of what to do, how to mitigate and report about it? You need to, as part of that process, those on the front lines need to be able to explain what's happening to the decision makers, whether that's the CIO or the CEO. They don't want to be the ones kind of dealing with the data and traffic and network analysis using the AI tools. They just want to know, what is this going to potentially cause? What does it mean for my company? What does it mean for beyond that? What should we do? And so again, there's an opportunity where kind of AI human teaming could work better by having kind of the human kind of look at those results and recommendations and be able to then explain, here's the current status, here's how it impacts us, here's what we need to do, much quicker and much more reliably than an AI system could.
Do you think there will be any parts of industry and business that won't be affected? Will there be a career that doesn't get affected by AI?
It's very hard to think of things. I mean, I think you could find ways to keep going. You'll just be missing out, for some careers. I mean, I do think it's going to shift to more careers and just more kind of, I think, roles, regardless of sector or career, that focus on higher level thinking, critical analysis, problem solving, creativity. Creativity is still, hard for AI systems to do. And so I think, as an educator, it means for me, a need to kind of, focus on that more in terms of the educational process, rather than teach students, how to use tools, teach them how to leverage tools and, think critically to solve problems. It's all about solving problems by leveraging the tool of the day or tool du jour, because we know for sure those tools will continue to evolve. And I think it creates that need for doing that, earlier on. Think about, what we teach in grade school. Can we, adapt the way we teach to focus more on problem solving, communication, critical thinking, creativity, and not just kind of the standard, here's how we do math, here's how, we study history, because a lot of that we're already seeing changes, to the use and the need for. So I think some people will be able to continue on, but they'll be, it's just think about, who all is not using, for example, the internet or World Wide Web right now, right? There are some still not using it, but they're missing out on a lot, right? By not doing so. And so, how do we make those tools and resources available and easily usable and accessible to everyone? That's going to be key for, global society to move forward together.
When can we expect robot basketball?
Oh, pretty soon. I've actually, we there's quite a bit of that. So there's robots, of course, robots are used in healthcare quite a bit, for, surgery, for, patient healthcare, hospital management, things like that. And there are competitions, that, for robot soccer. I've seen that. I know we've taught some of those courses, here as well. So it just won't be as interesting probably, or maybe it will be to me, to others. It depends on who you ask.
Will you be watching?
Oh, definitely. As both, a sports fan and as a robotics and AI fan, definitely. And maybe we could see, the robots versus the humans, or the human teams. That'll be interesting as well.
That's brilliant. We'll consider that a pitch to whoever's watching this, definitely.
I think at the end, it's just important to note how truly transformative AI is, and, how quickly we are seeing, adaptation affecting every aspect of our life right now, as individuals, as organizations, as communities, as a global society. It's just truly, I think, revolutionary and transformative. And so, with great power comes great responsibility. So there's always the pros and the cons that we've got to pay attention to. And I think even, in years, like you're saying, people will come back and say, this was a transformative time, and here we are kind of talking about it, because I don't think this is just another AI tool. I think this is a revolution. What we're witnessing right now is a revolution that we will look back on and think, wow, and probably future generations will think, I can't believe they were doing it that way before all this, right?
My first experience with ChatGPT, I got it, I think, within my very first request was, write me 2 haikus and tell me which is more beautiful. And of course it did it. And I just went.
For me, especially, I think it's very exciting because I remember, I've been doing this in Portuguese for so long, giving away my age, that I remember, when I teach, telling students about, just kind of get them interested and intrigued, especially at the beginning of the semester, about there will come a time when X, Y, Z, right? And here we are. I mean, some of this is happening right now in my lifetime.
Subscribe to the Hello Computer channel here on YouTube to hear more interviews with experts as the world comes to terms with thinking machines.